And welcome back to day 2. We've already introduced ourselves to everyone here on Zoom, but for future viewers, all 5 of you who aren't currently watching it and are catching up on things, we welcome you back. Today we are going to go have a little bit of an intro and then transition into visualizing data using Ggplot and having a lot of fun with that, or at least what Kate and I think is fun. And hopefully you will too. And then we will merge some data sets that we have. So to get started, last time we had created the project for this, and if you aren't able to, or you aren't caught up on things, you can go to the OSF link that, Kate, you said you put that in the chat there.
I need you to reset my OSF password. It's coming.
Okay.
I'll just go to the email.
You could do that too. So you can go there, and there is a folder that has this information. But because we created the project, and remember, the project really situates our workspace in the spot that we want. It situates it within this folder. So to start it back up, we actually want to open the project. So we're going to double click that, and that will open up our RStudio, and you'll see that it probably left your script maybe was there. It has that information, or like for me, I had the data sets open when I closed the project. One way to confirm that you have the project open and that you're working in the project that you want is actually going to be up in this right hand corner. You will see the name of the workshop up there, and you'll be able to use it, and that's how you know that you're in the right spot. You can also check to see the files tab here should situate it within this space as well, if you haven't navigated away from that. So what we're going to be doing today, and in case you don't have once you open the project, and it might be the case that all of this, see, I had renamed it, so it's like, I don't know what this is. It might look like this, but you still have the project up in the top right corner. And that's perfect. That's exactly where we want to be. You can just go back and navigate to where you have the script and open that up. And like I said at the beginning, I just made a copy from day 1, and I just copy pasted it and named it day 2. And this is really, again, for looking to the future, that when you go back on this, it's a little bit easier to navigate if you're rewatching YouTube videos of where the information is. So I'm going to open up my day 2. You can keep it, if you're following along in real time, you can keep it all in one file. That is totally okay as well. One of the things that I wanted to touch on, last time we talked about installing libraries, and we always were doing that down here in the console with the install.packages, and I just don't know how to spell packages. So that is how you install, how you get the libraries and work on them then on your machine. There are times when it seems like either it didn't load right, or it might have gotten out of the install, and for some reason it wasn't working. And in traditional IT, the first question is always, did you turn it off and turn it back on again? For packages, that is removing the package and then putting it back in. And so to do that, you don't have to do this if you're following along. This is just for future reference. Let's say our dplyr, something went up with that and it wasn't working, or let's do psych. So what we can do then is say remove.packages, and then in quotes the name of the package. So in our case it's psych. It will remove it from wherever it was defaulted to install. And now if I were to try to load this library, it'll be like, I have no idea what that is, because it's gone. To get it back, just install.packages, psych, in quotes, again, single or double, it doesn't matter. Now it's going to go to our repository, grab that information, install it on the local machine, and I'm all good to go. So now when I run the library psych call, excuse me, it runs. There's no errors that come up. So if you're having difficulty with a particular package, or it might be the case that I know with Ggplot sometimes there's some dependencies, meaning it requires another library in order to run, and sometimes those dependencies get a little wonky, and installing those separately or removing them and then reinstalling them is usually the way to go.
Yeah, so we have a question from Rachel, which is, why did you install libraries at the top, but the packages in the console? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So there are two ways, or there are two components to using a package. And the tricky thing is, like, packages and libraries are identical in this terminology. So installing packages is basically going to the repository, the local or the central repository where all of this information is held, and it is purchasing that. It's not, you don't have to buy anything. It's just that idea of you are then getting it and installing it onto your computer, and then it lives on your computer. When you then create a script, you need to tell your computer, I want to use that now, and it has to then go and grab it. And that's why we only have to install once, because then when we install, it's on our machine. We don't have to do that again. Then we need to tell it, hey, now go and look for those things. And we always put those libraries up at the beginning. It signifies to us what libraries we're using right away. And if you share this information with somebody else, then then that works and it's okay. Then they know exactly what's going on.
You can do it in, if this was your question or part of your question as well, you can also do that, install it in your R Markdown. Yeah, exactly. You just don't need to. Sometimes, because I'm still like learning, something I'll do is I'll install it in my like code or in my R Markdown, but since you don't need to reinstall it, I'll just, after I install it, I comment it out. So to comment something, yeah, exactly. So like Justin just did. And sometimes like I'll just comment stuff out if I want to keep it for the record, but I don't want it to run again and again and again. So that can be a tool you can use.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you're like install.packages requires an internet connection, so maybe you're trying to run script in the car because you're like going home or something, and which grad students often do. This install packages won't run, and then it will halt all of what you're working on. Whereas these are just looking and working on your own machine, looking at the libraries.
We also have a question from Rosanna, which I'll just direct you to the chat since it's.
Let's see. So this is also a. I'm just going to copy paste the what is in the chat here in this section. This might be a error message that you get, and this is like what I'm looking at is it's looking at I'm focusing here on this need compilation, and that usually requires that R tools component, and that is, it's not always necessary. Usually R tools, like in the email I wrote it just a little bit, but it's a way to create packages and create libraries for when you're generating things, and certain libraries might require it. If you're able to, if it does prompt you to ask, like, do you want to install packages that need compilation or not, then say no. And that, like, some dependencies, some of the newer versions are in like, they haven't been compiled yet, but you can use one of the older versions and it like a binary version, and that should be okay. So I'm going to remove, let's see what happens if I remove Ggplot and see what I run into. again, see, I just don't know how to spell. Remove packages. So now say install.packages. Again, spelled it incorrectly. Just use the autocomplete. That's what the moral of this is. And so it loaded in the binary packages here. So that might be, and this is probably because I have already downloaded it before and had this Ggplot is for making tables, and we can identify some other libraries as well in case Ggplot is causing some difficulty for a lot of folks. Then we don't have to worry about that. So for right now, I am going to comment that out so that I know not to use Ggplot, and I didn't load the library just yet. All right. What we are going to do now is we are going to run those library chunks, and you can see that down here in the console we're getting library psych. We get the warning. Again, it's just like a warning for a dplyr for masking things, so you don't need to worry about that right now. Then we need to load in our data, and what we're going to do, again, our data will lives here in our data folder. Just that's how I've structured things and how I would advise everyone else to. We'll read that in, so you can go line by line if you want, or you can run the whole thing. And we should be getting our tuition. We've got that. And let's see. Let's take a look back at the data. So I'm saving. I'm going to go and look at our tuition 3 data, just because that is what we just removed, that X variable, but it's not that big of a deal. So I'm just taking a look at it, and let's see. So we have names of different universities, where they're located, types of universities, and the, let's see, degree length. So this looks like a good intro to Ggplot. Let's go ahead and we'll use this data set for our Ggplot. And what I'm actually going to do, because I will probably forget the 3 at the end, I am just going to use the tuition data set. And that's okay. We have it loaded in. It's still the same data set. Everything is still the same. We don't need to, I'm just maximizing my markdown window, which again, you can just click one of those. Scrolling down, we don't need to run these. This right here, I'm going to put just a comment for future us that this requires Ggplot, so that we know that this part here requires Ggplot. And one other cool trick in RStudio that I really like is you comment things out. You can comment each line. You have to comment each line or else it will try to run it. But maybe you are trying to comment out a big section of code and you don't want to go line by line or miss things. So in Windows, I hold Alt, and you notice if you take a look at my cursor, when I hold the Alt key, it turns into a crosshair. And what that is actually allowing me to do, I hold Alt and I pull the cursor down, and that makes a larger cursor where I can write then on every line. That's something that's really fun and interesting. Makes code just a little bit faster to write. I think it's Alt in Windows. Kate, can you confirm what it is in Mac?
I was just checking it. It's Option, which says Alt in the corner, so it works the same way.
Great. And that's you can also do it at the end. So it will go then on each of those lines, and then you can type on each line. It's really cool when you're making like a whole list of things. Really helpful.
Feels creepy. like your Dr. Octopus, Doc Ock, what's it from Spider-Man?
Yeah. Why? Why? What?
So
Just
you like
many.
have all the cursors.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm gonna be quiet again. Keep teaching.
Okay, I'm gonna try. I'm distracted now thinking about Spider-Man. Um, I am going to create a new code chunk here, and again, the keyboard shortcut for me is Control Alt I. You can also use the Insert New Code Chunk here. One thing I want to introduce here is what this section does in these little curly brackets. This can be really helpful. We've already started accruing a number of different code chunks, and it can get a little overwhelming once you have a list of these, and to organize yourself, this will come in handy quite a bit. So the R needs to stay there. That shows RStudio what what code it should be running. So we want to always run R, or else I don't know other languages, so it wouldn't make sense. You put a space, and then you can type basically a header. So ggplot, you can type whatever you want in here. And what this does is it operates as a kind of a header for your code chunks. And you can see down here in the bottom left, this will help you navigate code chunks. And if you click down here, you can see that all of our different code chunks are there. The only one that has a name is the last one, because we actually named that code chunk. This will be really helpful once you have multiple ones, and you can navigate then quickly between them if you need to. And so that is just one way. Usually what I'll do is, if we scroll up, I like to organize the library and just write my libraries, so that I know that first code chunk is libraries. And then I usually have a data chunk as well. So again, this is just taking a space and then adding in the whatever you want to call it, and it just helps to organize yourself as you move forward. Let's see. So then you can see now our code chunks are all set there. Now we can navigate quickly to our code chunk for Ggplot. So what we are going to be using, like I said, we will be using our tuition data set. You don't need to worry about having tuition 3 loaded in. It won't change anything. And we are going to, Ggplot works well and works in a similar way you can think of as it takes the piping framework, in that you're adding layers to your plot. So we're going to go to help, go to cheat sheets, and there is this data visualization with Ggplot 2. And this is one of the nice cheat sheets that we'll be getting. And I clicked on it, and now my computer is thinking really hard. Why are you thinking so hard? That's how I feel sometimes. That's okay. Be understanding of your computers. They've gone through a lot. Now we have our cheat sheet, and this will be, I just want us to have it open so that we can refer back to it as we are moving forward. Ggplot, like I said, works in a series of layers. So before we actually run anything in Ggplot, we need to go back up to the top to our library section. And I was just using this to navigate here. You can scroll up to the top, but we need to load the library for Ggplot. So we're going to say library Ggplot 2. And you need to make sure to run that line of code. And I have it installed. If you do not, you will get an error message, and that just means that you have to go into the console, or you can do it we can do it up here in our code chunk, install.packages, quote, or parenthesis, quote, Ggplot 2. Then you can run that and then add in the library and make sure that that is run as well. I will comment that out so that we have that there, and saving it. How are we all doing right now? Everyone has Ggplot installed. We're going good. And then they ran the library one as well. All right. You can see that here with Ggplot, we do get a masking warning. The tidyverse does a nice job at telling you what the masking is and what all this is. So if for some reason, like in the psych package, you may be trying to get Chromeback's alpha, and that would be important to know that, oh, now my alpha call is being masked. If you want to go back and use the psych one, we can talk about that at a later point, but it will not interfere with what we're doing today. So now we have all that installed. I'm going to go back down to our Ggplot chunk, and the basic structure of Ggplot is you say Ggplot. And what this is saying is I want to make a plot. And you'll notice that once you put those parentheses on it, you can see it's asking for a data, it's asking for mapping, and those are going to be our two biggest components. We need to tell it what data we want to use. So right now we're going to use the tuition data set. So we can say tuition. You might also see in other situations, people will be putting data equals. You don't have to do that. It knows that whatever the first thing you put in there is the data frame. It's the data. So you don't need to actually put that, but just as a heads up, you might be seeing that in other areas. And then we need to say AES, and we're going to leave it like this for right now, just to get that basic structure. So AES stands for aesthetics, and it is what are the variables that you actually want to visualize. What do you want to look at? So if we take a look back at our tuition data set, we can create, why don't we create a histogram on the public versus private. Let's see. So we have type, public, private, for profit. There's a number of different ones. One way to take a look at that in a little bit more detail is we can use the, let's see, it should be structure. Nope. Let's take a look at this. So we want to know what are the actual components of this type variable. And we could look at all of them, or we could just ask for them. One way to look at the structure of a variable is through str. And then you use the open parenthesis. And then you need to say, I want to look at a particular variable in a particular data set. So we are looking at the tuition data set. And then you use the $sign, which is on the number 4, shift 4. And then you say the name of the, you can see that after I put the $sign, it's saying, here are all of the variables in this data set. And what we want to look at is what is the type. And so this is saying, this can be really helpful, is that it's a character variable, and there are 1 through 2,973 variables, and it's just listing this again. So there are, let's see, with characters, it might be a little tricky there. Kate, what would you like to, have you been thinking about this data set, and what do you think would be a good, or other suggestions on how to visualize or what we want to know about this?
Yeah, in opening up tuition, I'm looking at like states. We could do like tuition cost by state or something like that.
Okay.
Maybe. We'd have to, that would be a pretty big histogram. We could do tuition cost by degree length.
Yeah, let's do that.
Feel free to suggest something if you're looking at the data and there's something in there that looks interesting to you.
Why don't we do, if we don't get any suggestions here in the next couple minutes, we can filter by state again. We can choose a state and then look at a scatter plot of the
we could do New York versus California. How many public versus private? I don't know. Let me just distract you with more ideas.
Okay, so let's go ahead and just look at in-state tuition for right now. So one of the things that we can actually do is if we go back to our data visualization cheat sheet, you can see that it is sectioned into, do you have one variable or do you have two variables, and what types of variables they are. And right now we can just do why don't we do like a dot plot or a frequency plot. So we'll be focusing here on using one variable for right now in trying to look at what is the distribution of this variable. So I am going to take this and just put it on the side so that we can look at both of these as we're going. I'm just readjusting windows here, going back to my R Markdown file, and what we want to do, I usually like to just make sure I have the correct names of the data set on hand rather than having to switch back and forth. So I like to do names and then the name of the data set, tuition, and then run that so that now we have, here's the list of all of the variables in the data set. And let's do a dot plot of, let's see, in-state tuition. So right now we're saying I want to create a plot from the tuition data set, and then the aesthetic, we need to tell it what variable we want to use. So what you can do, you can either type it, or because I am not good at typing apparently and misspell things often, you can copy paste. And what this is going to do is it lays the foundation for your plot. And let's see, if we run that, nothing is going to happen. So you will look in your, I'm going to maximize this so that we can see it. It will open up in our plot section. Not nothing happens, but nothing that you can really do anything with. And it's because we've just laid the foundation. This is our base layer. We're doing the setting up the X and Y variable. We're trying to see what is, we have our in-state tuition down here at the bottom. And then that seems to fit the range of these, but we haven't told it what to graph. We don't know what layer you want to add on top of that. So if we look back at, I'm going to just move things around. You can see over here on our cheat sheet, we have again our single variable, and you can see that this part right here is what we have done. We have taken our data set, which in this case for us is called tuition. We've put the aesthetic, and then we have said what variable we want. And this can be really confusing when reading some of these, but they are just assigning that to the letter C. So it would be the same. So whenever you see the letter C here, you can replace it with this. And that, it just for presentation purposes, it's easier to write that, and you get more in this cheat sheet than if they had to write that each and every time. But for our purposes, we want to be very clear about what we're saying, so we're going to keep that. And so you can see you add C plus. So in hours, I'm going back here and I'm going to put space and then the plus sign. And I usually like to put this on the next line. So I hit enter and you'll notice that it auto tabs for us. And it just, again, looks a lot nicer when we're looking at it. And let's do I'm going to do a dot plot. So I'm going to take this and now we're adding another layer. So we're just saying geom underscore dot plot, open parenthesis, close parenthesis. And that should go away. It should, is it not? Why is it not going away? Okay, well, we're going to try to run that. And
beautiful.
That's great. That's exactly what we're wanting. Let's publish on that. So maybe the dot plot isn't good. I want us to now take a look at our single variables here and go ahead and try some out and see which ones you like, which ones make the most sense for you. So we are just changing this second part here, our second line, from geom dot plot. Maybe we want something else. Like, what are we thinking? Maybe an area
plot looks better.
Which one?
A density plot.
So geom density?
Yeah, it looks a little bit nicer.
Let's see.
You can also mess around with whatever. If you type in geom underscore, it'll suggest a lot of things to you.
Just, yeah, it's not gonna, you're not breaking anything. This is, you can copy paste and like, here's what the density plot looks like. Here's what all these look like. So you can see that, yeah, I think this is like a best fitting for the distribution. Looks like a lot are under 20,000, which is interesting to see for in-state tuition. One of the other things that is really helpful is, like, we ran 2 pieces of code. We got 2 plots, but we only see one. You actually use these arrows to navigate back and forth. So we can look at our really not appealing one and then one that looks a little bit better. Let's see, what are some other ones? Anybody else have any good suggestions? And you may be getting the output right below in the in your markdown document. I see someone saying that that's the case. The reason why is that I have chunk output in console in the settings here up at the top middle of my markdown document. I have that set to console. So that means that all my code is going to show up down here in the console and any plots will show up in this bottom right hand. If you do have this set to chunk output in line, then it will likely show right below it. And now my computer got confused. It's like, why are you telling me to do all these different things? Just let me do one. So I'm going to go back and do that.
Yeah, I've always preferred to have mine in my art markdown. It's like right below and then you can hide it after.
Yeah, again, those are just like preferences that we have and things that we're thinking about.
My way's better though.
What?
I'm way less experienced with R than you, but my way's better.
Oh my goodness. Are we going to fight now, Kate? Is that what's going to happen?
Yes.
Okay. I'll take your co-host abilities away. We'll see what happens then. Let's see. What about a histogram? Anybody have any? Let's see. Okay. The histogram's actually looking pretty nice. And it says that it is using bins. I do see a question in the chat too about this bin width and what binning is. I don't tend to use histograms that often. So Kate, if you have talked about this or know a little bit more about binning, feel free to jump in. It is the range, right? That because the histogram, there are we have a continuous distribution when it comes to our in-state tuition variable, and we're a bin then is like how much we're chunking it. And so it would be from 0 to 30, that is our bin width is 30. So then we would like everyone in that 30 would get into that bin. And to update that, what we can do is now in our histogram, now we have a different call here. Or Kate, do you have anything to add on binning?
No, the most experience I had is just kind of is very unscientific in that for a class we just kind of messed around until it like seemed the most reasonable. There are like official rules on binning, right, for like data visualization. I don't know what they are, but could probably like APA probably has some like better guidelines about what you're how you're supposed to present data if you're going to histogram if you're going to present a histogram.
Yeah, there's probably guidelines and things like that, but again, it's you want to pick things that visualize your data and represent your data, and you don't want to over under represent things. So if we do change the bin width, let's see what happens. It's thinking really hard because there are lots of observations, and you can see now that it's the bin width. I narrowed it down quite a bit, so each of these is very minute, and it's difficult. We can still see some of the distribution, but it is a little bit more difficult to get a good shape of it. So maybe we make it larger, or we make it even, because this is a large data set, maybe we want to go in the thousands or tens of thousands. And again, to just run a line of code, you don't need to highlight everything. You can just keep your cursor in either the first line or the second line, hit Control Enter, Command Enter. So now we're seeing a little bit more of a distribution because we are binning based on $1,000 for in-state tuition. Kate, would you like to briefly talk about where did you find the Wes Anderson plot or the Wes Anderson color palette, and how do you use that?
I Googled it. I was bored. I wasn't bored. I was working on homework and I like everyone turns in the same color homeworks and I was procrastinating doing the harder stuff on my homework. And so I was looking at some different cool color palettes and I just came across a Wes Anderson one. I believe the package is just Wes Anderson. Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem with this is you need to make sure that your color palette matches your like the amount of like you can't use Zissou 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with its 5 colors for something that has like 6 or more like bars of data or something like that. But otherwise it's like very fun to mess around with. And it looks like they added a few colors since I did this last. So cool.
So we're talking about different colors, and like this might be a good way to represent this data, and there might be some other things that we would like to include. So I'm going to go back to our cheat sheet here, because this is something that I use often, especially when it comes to Ggplot, because there's so much that you can do with it that it's difficult to be able to know everything. And this top part are the geomes, which again, these are the different layers that you can add on top of one another. And if we were to scroll down a little bit, here is where you can start seeing some of the additional like tweaking that you can do with Ggplot. And here is, let's see, you can change the themes. So this is something that can be really nice and straightforward and easy to do, where now you see, well, where is this R? What does that mean? And let's see, it's up here. It's kind of sneaky, but really once you get down in here, once you see that plus, it's just take your plot and then add that at the end. Let's see what happens when we use the minimal theme. So I'm just copying this, Control C. I'm going back to our data set here, and I'm going to say, paste that in. I should add a plus sign. And then like I said, I always like to enter down, and I usually end the line with a plus sign and then return down that portion. So now if we run that, it looks a little bit cleaner. Not much. The gray boxes are just not gray, and the lines are gray instead of white. Wonderful. Let's see, what might be we might need to add a title. Usually that's what happens. So we have a title, and we know that we're going to have to add another layer on it. So I'm automatically going to that plus sign, and then we're going back to our cheat sheet here. And you can see here under labels, you add this, it's labs, and then you can, inside of it, you can list then, maybe you want to change what the X and Y axis are, what the subtitle and titles are. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to split my screen again so that we can see everything all at once. It's a little bit easier as well when you're doing these things. So we have our minimal theme, and then we want to add our labels. Let's see where that is. So again, plus sign, returning down, hitting labs, and then saying our title is going to be in-state tuition. And then maybe we want to change the horizontal axis as well to be, so I'm going to say X because that is the horizontal. I always forget that, but you can always just say X or Y and then see what it changes, and then update it as according. So I'm going to say, because it is in the amount, and I'm going back to maximize. We can pull this over. I'm running the entire chunk by hitting this play button. And now you can see we have in-state tuition. We have dollars down here. Maybe we want to update that count to something else. And you can just go, we're still in our labs function here. Again, this is for reading purposes. It just makes it a little bit cleaner and easier for me to follow by using the comma and then entering down again. Gives you the new line, but it is still, if we go next to this closed parenthesis, we see that the accompanying one is up there by labs. So I'm going inside that parenthesis, comma, enter, saying y equals, and maybe I don't want it to say anything, so I can just do a set of quotes, and that should be fine. Let's see. There we go. So we have those components for our histogram. We can see that you can add subtitles or other components as well. Now maybe we can move on to 2 variables. What do we think about that, or is that too crazy?
We just have a few questions beforehand.
Okay.
So we have, how do you change what is being used on the count access? Yours is a raw number, and for hers, she sees a proportion.
It may be, I think, just making sure that the calls are all identical here from what I'm using. I think I'm not sure, maybe it isn't a histogram, or is it still a histogram and you're just getting the proportion?
Oh shoot, I see. I called it a dot plot. So thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, and because I was moving all around, we did different kinds of plots too. So that might be the case, but you're able to use then, what's really nice is that this stuff after that will stay the same. You don't, so maybe you're like, I want a density plot instead, and you can then run that, and all of the information thereafter is still going to apply, and we're still good there. But I think at least with what I've worked on, histogram seems to be the most straightforward. And it looks like wanting to center the title. Oh man, you all just want everything to look perfect, don't you? Let's see. I have that same thing. It always aligns it to the left, and it is a little frustrating when it does that. And we'll see later on, once we add in additional variables, how sometimes the legends get wonky as well. That's not something I know off the top of my head, so we are going to search for it. And let's see, we are going to go to Ggplot, spell it correctly again, Dustin, come on. People are watching. Ggplot, center title. And we can let's click on the first one and see what it's asking us. There are some additional things that can be added, and there are lots of things that lots of folks have put together when it comes to Ggplot in how to add and like make things your own. So there may be some other things here as well that we're not using. So there is this theme component. I'm looking here at the change title position to the center or any other location. And we need to add in, so you can see here's P, which, did they specify what P was? Nope, of course not. I don't see it anywhere. So we're going to assume that is just your plot. And we need to add theme. And then in the theme, we need to say, hey, in the plot title, I want to update the text to adjust it horizontally to the middle, which it's either 0, I think is left, and 1 is right, or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I've highlighted that. I'm going to copy, go back here, and we are going to do plus. I am hitting return again, pasting that in, and you can see I forgot that I included that plus sign. So now we have at the end, I've added this theme, which again, let's take a look. I think it was, sorry, I am kind of clicking all over the place. I'll keep my code up so you can take a look at that as well. There are times when you can, I was trying to find where I've seen that theme call before, and it's usually in reference to just adjusting components. I thought it was on the cheat sheet, but it's not. So we will go ahead and try to run that. And now you can see that it is centered. And if we want it to go back, we can do 0, or you can have it at, maybe you're like, I don't want it quite centered. I want it right towards, like right there. So these are all, again, these are just layers that we're adding on, and you can adjust them in one way or the other, which is really exciting, but then it's also can feel really overwhelming in what that is. We'll quickly go through maybe try to do two variables, and then we can take a break. Does that sound good? I saw Kate smile. I don't see anybody else. I'm smiling. Oh, I got thumbs up. Thank you. So we are, I'm going to say Ggplot. I'm just going up here into our header again. And this is just for organization purposes. It's helpful to know what is in each of these code chunks. I'm going to say Ggplot, one variable. And then below it, I'm creating another code chunk, Control-Alt-I for me. And then here, I'm going to say Ggplot, two variables.
Also, if you're someone who wants to like use Ggplot and like really wants to, I mean, hopefully all of you want to use R in your future. Like something that I'm going to do over break, but also that I've done is like I have various of like Ggplots that I've used before. So then you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Because it's annoying to have to like reference back and forth between the Ggplot sheet rather than do something you made before and be like, I want it to look mostly like that. I can tweak from there. So I personally am going to make a code book for myself with all of the Ggplots that I've made in the past. And that's something you can consider.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And usually I haven't been as organized as that. And I hope that you can do a better job than I have.
This is aspirational.
Usually what I do is like I did that in this one project and then I like go through and I'm like, there it is, and I copy paste. So this is a big ramp up in you're learning all this new information. Eventually, once you have that, it will benefit you moving forward. So taking those extra couple minutes to say, like, here, we looked this up, we saw that this, so we can put a comment here. I'm using the pound or hashtag, and I'm going to type a note to myself saying that this line centers the title. And it's okay if it goes down and wraps around. You can see that this is still technically one line because 80 just continues and then 81 is the next, so that's okay. You can even, if you want, you can do like enter here, and if you like everything sitting on one line like I do, you can do that as well, and that won't interfere with the code at all, because when there's a plus sign, it's looking for more code, and then it just looks down here, so it skips over that. So I would advise anytime you're like looking things up, you can even, what I'm gonna do is go back here, and you can copy that and put the actual website in there if you want as well. I'll keep it in here, you don't have to, so that if you want to refer back to it, it's right here. Let's do two variables. What two variables? In state versus out of state. Like there may be maybe schools that there's a greater difference between in state, out of state. So we're going to say again Ggplot. We are taking our tuition data set, and then we want to look at the aesthetics. These are our variables that we want to use, and it always defaults to whatever you put it in the first one is our X, second is Y. But you can also, I usually like to specify it, what my X variable is and what my Y variable is. So let's say X variable is going to be in state tuition, and then my Y variable, again, you can do comma enter if you want it to look a little bit more streamlined. Y is going to equal, I'm going to go down into the console and say names tuition, just to make sure I get this correct. And thank goodness it makes sense when you're naming variables. So I'm just copy pasting that back in. One other useful keyboard shortcut in what we're talking about is to navigate in between, say, your markdown document and the console. You can hit control 1 to go to your markdown document, and control 2 puts your cursor down into the console. So if you're going back and forth often, you can do that if you want to feel like a true coder. I don't know, you don't have to. Yes, we all type like this. So now we have that. Say we run it, and look, nothing happens. Thank goodness. That's okay. Nothing should happen because we didn't tell it what we wanted to do. Let's go back to our cheat sheet and see. I'm going to just make it bigger. We're going to scroll up to, now we have two variables. The one that is most often used is the, not jitter, geom point. This is, so we're taking a geom and we want each of it to be a point. So let's use that. You are welcome to try out any of these other ones if you want as well. We will, let's see, we'll combine some of these too. Exciting. So we're going to use, I'm going back now to our Ggplot and typing geom_point, open parenthesis, close parenthesis, and we run it, and it looks like that's really interesting that there there is seems to be a linear relationship between states, in-state and out-of-state tuition, but there's a lot which what you might expect where in-state, so this line is actually, there's a 1-to-1. So you can see 20,000 in-state is the same as 20,000 out-of-state. There are lots of states then that we get where in-state is cheaper than out-of-state.
For a minute, I thought that was a really weird looking regression line.
And that is what we can also do. So a lot of times in these graphs, you want to then see what is the best fit. What is the best fit line if we were to run a regression? So what we can do now, we've added a layer of all of our points. Now we want to add a layer on top of that with the fit line. And we do another plus sign. Again, I like to use spaces after each of these calls, each of these functions, just because it looks nicer to me. You don't have to. It won't impact your code one way or the other. Then we are entering down and going back to our cheat sheet. We see that the geom smooth is going to be what we will use to get a fit line. Now I'm going back and saying geom underscore smooth, and let's run that. And you can see that here it is actually using, you see that it will give you, there are lots of different ways to fit a line, or to fit like what is the best fit to the model, to the data that we have. And this is using like the GAM method. I can't remember what that stands for, but it is not a linear function, when most of the time we actually want a line, we care about a line. And if we look back to our cheat sheet, we can specify the method that we want to use. So we can say method equals LM, which LM stands for linear model. And let's go back to our markdown document, and inside geom smooth, we want to say method equals LM. And that will give us a line. And you can see down in the bottom that it is using the formula of a linear model, that we're taking one variable and predicting the other. You can see, let's see, I'm going to zoom in. Let's see if this does it. Because we have so many data points, these standard errors are tiny, tiny, tiny. But you can see that there is a gray box right on the outside. And that would be, that's your standard error, your error line, error bar on this. I think so. And again, we can play around with this. I think we're gonna be taking a break here in a minute.
We have a quick question.
Yeah.
Would there be a way to exclude schools where the in-state and out-of-state tuition are the same?
Ooh, I like it. We can do.
Yes.
Should we do that after a break? I don't want to keep folks longer than.
Yeah, let's do that, because I think that requires a couple steps, right? We do have one more question that can be short, which is, can you put a title on top of the table or image?
Yep, let's do
Heck
it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. We are going to take what we did above. I'm just copying it. You don't need to type it again. You already did it. Copying it. At the end, just adding a plus sign. You want to add that title layer on top of it. And let's paste that in. So if we were to run this, it would look strange because we didn't change the titles here. So let's say in-state versus out-of-state tuition. And then this is going to be our X is in-state. And for a second, I forgot what I put on the horizontal. You can look back up here. There's our in-state tuition. So we know that that is in-state, and then the Y is out-of-state. There we go. And then if you want to add maybe we want it centered, or we want it in a different, we want the title in another part, we will say this. And I just copied that from the above. And now we've got that. And so we will take should we do 10, 15 minutes? 45 minutes?
15 minutes. 15 minutes. I'm good to everyone.
How long did you say? I was talking over
15.
you. Okay. We do 15, get a snack, and then we'll come back at
Well, I mean, I guess we could just do 11:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
okay.
30.
18 minutes.
Yes. In that time, like, I'll go probably grab a snack and then come back. I am going to stop the recording